Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So, our mission here, as always, is to wade through this huge pile of source material, articles, reviews, all of it, and basically give you the essential stuff, the core knowledge you need to be, well, deeply informed.
Mm-hmm.
And today, we're digging into a writer whose whole career seems built on this fascinating, maybe even necessary contradiction. Nicholas P. Tosches. And just so we're all on the same page, it's pronounced Tosches.
Right, Tosches. And we should probably start with, well, the kind of praise that just sets the bar incredibly high from the get-go.
Yeah.
So back in 1982, he publishes this biography of Jerry Lee Lewis, the absolute wild man of rock and roll.
Hellfire.
Exactly, Hellfire. And the reaction was just definitive.
Right.
Rolling Stone magazine, the institution itself called it, and this is the quote, the best rock and roll biography ever written.
The best ever.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's our starting point. And honestly, that kind of praise alone, it cements his place, right? In music history, at least. But that's just scratching the surface, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Our mission today, really, is to go way beyond just the rock writing. We need to unpack the whole spectrum of what this guy achieved, how he took that raw, kind of urgent energy you find in the best rock journalism, and we started applying it to subjects all over the map. Heavyweight boxers, obscure country singers.
Sicilian financiers.
Right, and even ancient Roman history. There's this incredible range. We're talking about a biographer, an essayist, a novelist, a poet, someone who really did seem to set out to, transcend where he started.
And, the sources really back this up. They say he succeeded. Critically, he succeeded in transcending that genre.
Which is fascinating, because a deep dive into Tosches, it almost feels like a masterclass, doesn't it? How a writer can grab hold of a field like rock criticism, which, let's be honest, can be seen as kind of popular, maybe even disposable sometimes.
Sure, yeah.
And then use that as a launch pad into really high-level, serious literary work.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
He wasn't just writing about low culture, or what some might call low culture. He was injecting it with this incredibly high literary style, giving it a kind of mythological weight, the kind usually saved for, the classics.
He turned the American outlaw figure into something.
Yeah.
Epic.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's unpack how he got there, because his starting point, it's about as far from the traditional literary path as you can imagine. We go back 1949. Newark, New Jersey. Real working-class grit. That seems key to understanding his voice.
Indeed. October 23, 1949, Newark. And right away, his background gives us a huge clue to his unique perspective. His grandparents were arborists.
Arboristi. Okay, explain that a bit.
So they belong to this historic Albanian minority community, people who emigrated centuries ago from a village called Castelvecchio di Puglia in Apulia, Italy.
Huh. Okay, that feels important. More than just a dot on the map. It's cultural, right? It suggests this early connection maybe to diaspora, to cultural survival almost, being an outsider looking in.
Precisely. You hit it. His ancestors were, in a way, these preserved outsiders living within Italy itself. So it likely gave him this inherent, maybe deep-seated appreciation for cultural undergrounds, for narratives that exist outside the mainstream.
Which is exactly where he looked for his subjects later on.
Exactly. And this kind of inherent outsider thing, it was then sort of compounded by his education, or maybe, more accurately, his lack of conventional education.
Yeah, the sources are clear on this. The guy who wrote these biographies that people treat like serious literature, he barely finished high school. No college. That's vital, isn't it? He wasn't learning his craft in some MFA program. He was learning it on the streets. Maybe even literally in the swamps later on, and just through the sheer hustle of trying to make a living.
And that hustle, it led him through the series of early jobs that, well, they read like a list designed to forge a writer's sensibility, broaden his range. These jobs tell you so much about his early character, his willingness to just confront the weird corners of American life.
Okay, lay them out for us.
Well, first, pretty straightforward. A porter for his family's business back in Jersey.
Okay. Grinding, working class stuff.
Purely. Then he moves into, well, maybe the slightly awkward underbelly of glamour, you could say. He worked as a paste-up artist for the Lovable Underwear Company in New York City.
Lovable underwear. Seriously. Okay, that's a jump. From hauling boxes in Newark to designing ads for lingerie in Manhattan.
It's a striking narrative beat, isn't it? Puts him right in the thick of low-level media, the fashion world.
Yeah.
He's seeing how appeal is constructed, right? Manufactured glamour.
Yeah.
The gap between the surface and the reality underneath.
You can totally see how that might inform his later stuff, like the Dean Martin biography, that whole dirty business of dreams idea.
Absolutely. It's about observing that gap, but then comes the real pivot, the job that just seals his reputation as this totally uncompromising individual.
This is the snake hunting.
This is the snake hunting. Early 1970s, Tosches doesn't head off to some writer's retreat. Nope. He moves to Florida. And he gets a job as a snake hunter for the Miami Serpentarium.
Wow. Okay, that's not just an anecdote, is it? It's like a mission statement written in venom.
It really is a statement of character. A snake hunter. Think about it. The guy who would later chronicle the darkest truths of American life, he spent time literally seeking out poisonous reptiles in the wild.
It kind of embodies that whole dirty business attitude he wrote about later. That willingness to face danger, go where others wouldn't, handle toxic subjects carefully.
With precision and focus. Exactly. That deep investigative hunger, the need to go right to the source, no matter how remote or, frankly, dangerous that feels, like the core connection between his life and his art.
He wasn't scared of the metaphorical venom in someone like Sonny Liston's life story.
Not at all. And yet, despite this incredibly wild, non-traditional background, he didn't actually struggle to get published, did he?
No, apparently not. His talent seems to have been pretty undeniable right from the start. He got his first piece published in Fusion magazine when he was only 19.
19. Which just shows this incredible precocity, this confidence. He found his voice and, crucially, his subject matter almost immediately. Early rock and roll, those oddball records that most critics were just ignoring.
He didn't need anyone to teach him the rules, it seems. He was too busy making his own.
Pretty much.
19 years old, already writing with that grit, focusing on the marginalized figures of American music. It really sets the stage for a career defined by, well, subversion.
And his rise, it timed perfectly with what we now look back on as like the golden age of American music journalism. He made a name for himself really quickly, writing these groundbreaking pieces for huge magazines like Cream, like Rolling Stone.
Right. But importantly, he wasn't just chasing the big stars, was he? He was also the reviews editor for Country Music Magazine.
Yeah, which again signals that deep interest in the roots, right? The often overlooked foundational stuff in American music.
And this is where the sources really push him beyond just being a great music critic. The claim is huge. He's described as, quote, the best example of a good rock journalist who set out to transcend his genre and succeeded.
To transcend the genre, that means using rock and roll, its immediate explosive energy, as a lens to explore these deeper, almost mythological American themes.
He was part of that wave, wasn't he? Writers who really changed the game for rock writing.
Totally. The sources put him right alongside figures like Lester Bangs, Richard Meltzer, that whole crew. A handful of other notables, as one source puts it.
What did they do differently?
Well, they injected rock writing with real literary ambition. They weren't just reviewing albums. They were writing about the experience of the music, the chaos, the culture around it, the philosophy, maybe, of the artists themselves. They elevated it, to a new plateau of serious writing.
Okay, but here's the tension, right? He's getting famous within these big institutions, like Rolling Stone, the ultimate rock establishment mag back then. But at the same time, he's all about the outsider, sticking it to the man. How did he square that?
He didn't square it. He blew it up. The classic story, the perfect anecdote that captures that rebellious streak, that intellectual subversion, is why he left Rolling Stone. He got fired.
Fired? Why?
Because he and Richard Meltzer cooked up this scheme where they filed record reviews under each other's bylines.
Wait, they just swapped names on reviews?
Yep.
That's more than just a prank, though, isn't it? It feels like a statement, like a critique disguised as a stunt.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just, mislabeling for fun. It was a pretty radical comment on authorship, on the whole journalistic establishment. By swapping bylines, they were basically asking, hey, does the expert's name matter more than what's actually being said? Than the truth of the writing.
Subverting the whole idea of the expert voice and the power of the masthead.
Exactly. That act pretty much cemented his rep as this iconoclast, someone who just refused to play by the rules of the institution.
And that spirit rebellion, dedication to the marginalized, it seems like it directly informs his first big books, right?
Yeah.
Which were all about digging up the messy, often uncomfortable roots of American music.
His focus was always on the origins, yeah. His first book, Country, the biggest music in America, came out in '77. But later, it got retitled smartly, I think, to Country, The Twisted Roots of Rock and Roll.
Ah, Twisted Roots. That title says it all, doesn't it? He wasn't interested in the polished final product. He wanted the dark, complicated, often contradictory history behind it.
Precisely. And that focus really solidified with his next big one, Unsung Heroes of Rock and Roll. The Birth of Rock in the Wild years before Elvis. That was 1984.
Unsung Heroes. That book feels really important.
Oh, it's arguably one of the most crucial pieces of rock history from that era, because it fundamentally challenged the accepted story, the canon. Tosches argued that the real explosive energy of rock wasn't just born with Elvis in '56.
Right. He was bubbling up for years before that.
Exactly. With all these obscure, often totally forgotten figures, black artists, white artists, country, blues, proto-rock guys people history had overlooked, and the fact that the book kept getting re-released, new editions in '91 and '99.
It shows it wasn't just history. He was actively redefining it, making the case again and again for the importance of the margins, the obscure, the messy beginnings of the stars we ended up worshiping.
Yeah, redefining it for new generations. It's a landmark work in that sense.
Which brings us right back to the book that kind of defines his career apex, the one that really broke him out of just the rock critic box, Hellfire, the Jerry Lee Lewis story, 1982. We have to talk about this claim, the best rock and roll biography ever written. What makes it stand out so much? Why is it considered so definitive?
Well, I think Hellfire became definitive because Tosches approached Jerry Lewis not just as a musician or a celebrity, but as a genuine American mythological figure.
Mythological.
Yeah, Lewis was the perfect subject for him, really, because he embodied these profound, often really destructive contradictions. Here's this Pentecostal Christian piano player, right, where he's on fire and brimstone theology, but he's constantly fighting this internal war, salvation versus sin, fame versus damnation.
It's that theological tension that Tosches zeroes in on, isn't it? He doesn't treat Lewis's life like, just a tabloid scandal sheet. Oh. It's more like this epic battle for the soul of a really flawed genius.
Exactly right. And the prose reflects that. It's less journalistic, much more literary, it's fragmented, it's lyrical, and it's driven by this relentless focus on Lewis's inner demons, his internal landscape.
He takes the raw facts, the underage cousin marriage, the absolutely wild performances, the destructive behavior, and he elevates it all. Makes it feel like, Greek tragedy. Or maybe more like a Southern Gothic epic.
That's a great comparison, Southern Gothic epic. It's written with this narrative force that just captures the fever pitch of Lewis's music itself and also the deep hypocrisy of the society that was judging him.
And once he proved he could do that, he realized he could take that approach anywhere, couldn't he? Apply that mythological framework to basically any American outsider.
That's the genius move of his post-Hellfire career, absolutely. He didn't just keep writing music books, he immediately demonstrated that this unique, searing style could work for figures way outside the music world.
But they all shared that same core conflict, right?
Yeah.
Lives lived intensely, dangerously, often tragically, right on the edge of the American dream.
The sheer breadth of his subjects after Lewis, it shows this profound intellectual thread connecting seemingly really different people. They're all studies in power, in ambition, and ultimately the price you pay for operating outside the lines of conventional morality.
Okay, let's trace that path. The most obvious next step from music seems to be Dean Martin, the singer, the entertainer.
Right. Dino. Living High in the Dirty Business of Dreams, 1992. And Martin gets the same unflinching gaze. Now, why Martin, you might ask? Why not Sinatra, the more obvious, maybe dominant figure?
Good question.
Because Martin, for Tosches, was a study in this almost effortless detachment. He was the cool crooner operating in the orbit of the Rat Pack, the mob, that collision point of glamour and grit. Tosches saw Martin as the ultimate cynic, a guy who knew the whole game was just a dirty business dreams, and he just played his part with this kind of knowing shrug.
Fascinating take. Then he makes a really sharp turn into pure sports tragedy, the American underclass, with the heavyweight boxer Sonny Liston, the devil and Sonny Liston. That was 2000.
Liston is just archetypal Tosches, isn't he? This huge, silent, menacing figure, a figure of violence who was also deeply exploited and ultimately consumed by the underworld characters who controlled him.
Yeah.
Tosches treated Liston's life, his mysterious past, his rise, that shocking defeat by Ali, his really ambiguous death. He treated it all with the gravity of, Shakespearean fatalist. He wasn't just reporting on a boxer. He was analyzing how American violence and exploitation create their own tragic heroes.
And in between, he still found time to dip back into music history, right? With Where Dead Voices Gather in 2001.
Yeah, focusing on Emmett Miller, a white country singer who used blackface. Incredibly controversial figure, but crucial to the development of country and Western. Again, Tosches going right for those ethically complex, uncomfortable roots.
Okay, now here's where the trajectory gets really wild and forces you to see Tosches not just as a biographer, but almost as a historian of the global underworld. He wrote an authorized biography of Hall & Oates.
He did. Dangerous Dances, 1984. A bit of a commercial outlier, maybe.
But then immediately after that, he makes this unbelievable leap. He writes about the Sicilian financier Michele Sindona in Power on Earth, 1986.
Yeah. From Daryl Hall and John Oates to a Sicilian banker neck-deep in Vatican financial scandals, organized crime, global political intrigue.
That pivot just confirms it, doesn't it? Tosches wasn't just interested in the, let's say, emotional violence of rock or boxing. He was fascinated by the mechanisms of power, the ones that operate in the shadows, especially those with that European historical context, which maybe connects subtly back to his own Arbor-Brescia heritage.
That's a really insightful connection. And he kept that focus on the intellectual architects of crime, didn't he? With his book on Arnold Rothstein, King of the Jews, in 2005.
Rothstein, the gambler, the racketeer, the guy supposedly behind fixing the 1919 World Series. He kind of embodies that shift from old world vice to modern, organized American crime.
So you look at all these subjects together. Jerry Lee Lewis defying God, Sonny Liston defying the odds, Arnold Rothstein defying the law. What's the common thread?
They're all men who tried to grab control of their own destiny, right? To get power, find meaning outside of polite society, no matter the cost, spiritual or literal.
That's it. And Tosches' genius was treating them not as, criminals or sociological case studies, but as modern American myths, fully deserving of the highest literary attention he could give them.
And while he's tackling these huge biographical projects, he's still working as a journalist, too, keeping his eye sharp.
Absolutely. Contributing editor at Vanity Fair, publishing in places like Esquire, Open City, constantly applying that same sharp investigative lens across different formats. And we should mention that collaboration, too, with the French painter Thierry Alonso Graveleur.
Right, on the book Never Trust a Loving God.
Which just sounds like the most perfect Tosches title ever, doesn't it?
So by the late 80s, he's got this established fame from the biographies, the journalism, which seems to free him up to really focus seriously on fiction, right? Long-form fiction.
Exactly. And this is where he could really synthesize everything. That high-low aesthetic, blending street-level crime grit with this deep historical and often theological weight.
Let's run through the novels, because they show this real commitment to the purely literary form, often using narrative structures that kind of mirror his nonlinear mythological way of doing biography. He started with Cut Numbers in '88.
Correct. Then Trinity is in 1994.
And then came the one that got maybe the most attention, In the Hand of Dante, 2002.
Yeah, that was arguably his most ambitious novel. It explicitly weaves together historical literature, Dante himself, with rare manuscript theft, modern crime. It basically takes the structure he used for Lewis or Rothstein and turns it inward into fiction. It got huge critical buzz, really solidified him as a major novelist.
And he kept going. Me and the Devil in 2012, and then that deeply historical one, Under Tiberius, in 2015.
5 novels total. Plus, we should mention a poetry collection, Chaldea and I Dig Girls from 1999, and a short work, Johnny's First Cigarette, in 2014. This is the output of a serious, dedicated literary artist, not just biographer dabbling.
No question. And that seriousness, that literary commitment, it's maybe best underlined by the list of writers he cited as his influences. It's surprising.
Yeah.
And diverse.
It really is. You might expect, Bukowski or maybe Raymond Chandler, given the subject matter sometimes.
Right.
But what you get instead is this incredible blend of the ancient and the fragmented modern, and it perfectly explains the epic scope of his writing.
Okay, lay them out for us. Who did he claim?
Hesiod, Sappho, Christopher Marlowe, Ezra Pound, William Faulkner, and Charles Austen.
Wow. Okay. Hesiod and Sappho, ancient Greeks, foundational voices of Western myth and poetry. Right next to Ezra Pound, the high modernist architect of difficulty, fragmentation, and Faulkner, the master of Southern Gothic decay, and Marlowe.
It makes perfect sense, though, doesn't it, when you think about it that way? It explains why he saw someone like Jerry Lee Lewis through the lens of classical tragedy.
Yeah, he wasn't just seeing a piano player pounding away in a bar. He was seeing a figure grappling with eternal human stuff. Sin, ambition, fate on this grand epic scale.
That high-low mix wasn't just style for him, it was philosophical, it was deeply embedded. And for listeners who want to really explore that range, the Nick Tosches Reader, which came out in 2000, is probably the perfect place to start. Collects writings from across his whole career.
Good recommendation. And while literature was clearly his main focus later on, his persona, his voice, it was magnetic enough that he popped up in pop culture sometimes, right? Giving people a glimpse of the man behind the myths he wrote about.
Yeah, the one most people probably remember is his TV appearance with Anthony Bourdain.
Oh, right. On No Reservations, the Disappearing Manhattan episode from 2009. They shared a drink at Sophie's, that legendary dive bar in the East Village.
Exactly. And it wasn't just some standard celebrity interview, was it?
No, not at all. It was Tosches, the ultimate chronicler of the authentic American underworld, basically lamenting how fast the city was changing. Gentrification, the loss of that gritty character.
It was the perfect voice for that conversation, wasn't he? Mourning the displacement of the very types of characters, the outliers, the wise guys, the poets that filled his own books.
It was a poignant moment.
And he stayed connected to music, too, not just as a critic, but sometimes as a collaborator. He actually released some musical works. There was Blue Eyes and Exit Wounds with the novelist Hubert Selby Jr. back in '98.
Wow, Selby Jr., another chronicler of the depths.
Right. And then later, Autohagiography with Austin Bruckner in 2018.
And he'd show up in documentaries, too, often as the voice of authority on his subjects.
Yeah, like Louis Prima, The Wildest, in '99. And he was the obvious choice, really, to provide insight on his collaborator in Hubert Selby Jr. It'll Be Better Tomorrow in 2005. He was consistently the guy you went to for the unvarnished truth about the dangerous side of American art.
So when you think about the lasting impact of a writer like Tosches, someone who often worked a bit outside the mainstream critical buzz, but commanded this really intense admiration, how do you measure that? Sometimes it's by who admired him, right?
Absolutely. And in Tosh's case, we have probably the ultimate high-profile endorsement. The actor Johnny Depp. Depp wasn't just a fan, he was practically an evangelist for Tosh's work.
Yeah, I read about that. Depp's admiration was deep, and the quote from him really captures that immersive quality of Tosches' writing we've been talking about. Depp said reading one of his books was like having this intense personal experience with him.
Right. And he went on, didn't he, saying something like, hanging out with him is very much like being in one of his books.
Yeah, which is profound, actually. It suggests the writing was so authentic, so steeped in the world it described, that the line between the author, the subject, the writing itself just kind of dissolved.
He lived the style he wrote about, that uncompromising outsider viewpoint. He managed to fully inhabit it.
And the ultimate proof of that commitment, maybe, and the sort of tangible value placed on the legacy of this guy who started out hunting snakes, it comes down to money, in a way. A big investment.
You're talking about the literary estate.
Exactly. The sources confirm that Johnny Depp actually bought Nick Tosches' entire literary estate for $1.2 million.
$1.2 million. That's, well, it's a powerful statement, isn't it? More than just fandom. It ensures that his whole body of work, the biographies, the journalism, the novels, the poetry, it's all going to be actively managed, protected. It guarantees it'll survive, stay visible for future readers, future scholars.
It's the highest kind of market validation, really. A sign that his work is seen as essential American literature, not just, cult rock writing.
Couldn't agree more.
And Nick Tosches, he passed away on October 20, 2019 in Manhattan. Just 3 days before what would have been his 70th birthday. A true New Yorker, a lifelong writer, and his influence clearly is still being felt.
Yeah. So if we try to boil it all down, synthesize his whole career, I think the key takeaway for listeners is that Nick Tosches was this kind of supreme literary alchemist.
Alchemist? How so?
Well, he proved that the American outsider, whether it was a rock god like Jerry Lee Lewis or a tragic boxer like Sonny Liston, or even a historical gangster like Arnold Rothstein, that these figures were worthy of the same intense literary seriousness, the same mythological scope that we usually reserve for, his ancient influences like Hesiod and Sappho, or the modernist giants like Pound and Faulkner.
He didn't just document the low line.
He elevated it, transmuted it into high art.
And that transformation, that's why he sticks with you, I think. It makes me think back to that Dean Martin biography titled Dino, Living High in the Dirty Business of Dreams. That phrase, dirty business of dreams, considering all the different people he wrote about, all driven by this huge, often self-destructive ambition. What specific part of that dirty business do you think he captured best? Was it the spiritual conflict, the raw violence, the financial corruption?
That's a great question. They're all in there, aren't they?
They are. And maybe a follow-up for you, the listener, to think about. Based on that archetype he kept returning to, that tragic self-made figure caught between worlds, who else? What other unsung hero or maybe anti-hero do you think should have been next on his list? Who else deserved the full Tosches treatment?
Yeah, who would he have tackled next? Especially thinking about modern figures. It's a fascinating thought experiment.
Definitely something to chew on. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the extraordinary life and utterly uncompromising work of Nick Tosches. We really hope this gives you that definitive shortcut to understanding this essential American iconoclast.